All of that is my notes. I'm gonna go walk into traffic now. Because he to her face calls her a little thing. If someone to my face called me a little thing, you know what? They might not wake up with their testicles tomorrow. Poof! No more Adina. And I would know, because I scratched myself once and then promptly bled out of my arm. Like, are they Bluetooth connected to these screens? I don't really know if that's how infections work. Don't quote me, but I don't really think that's how infections work. Are we doing this video over here just so that way I can show off my lights? Yes. I am sick. So let's talk about this book and make myself feel worse. The last 10 chapters that I've read, chapters 21 through 30, haven't been bad. They haven't been atrocious compared to the first 10 and as boring as the second 10 that I had read. Still nothing has really happened. I mean, chapter 23, they're thrown into the trials, and we'll get to that. But still, other than that, nothing has happened during these trials. Like, nothing. This book should not be marketed as a Hunger Games anything, because it's not. It's more Red Queen than anything. Just because it's marketed as Hunger Games, a lot of the scenes in here felt like copy and paste from the Hunger Games into this book. And I don't know how I feel about that. This shouldn't be called an enemies to lovers slow burn, because there was no enemies to lovers, and by chapter 30, he was proclaiming his love to her on his knees and asking to spend the rest of his life with her. I don't think that's a slow burn. So chapter 1 is, as I said in the last video, a POV from Peyton about the ball. So chapter 20, if you remember, is Kai's POV about the ball. Chapter 21 is Peyton's POV at the ball, and then a little extra snippet afterwards. Instead of having Kai's POV at the ball, I think I would have preferred having Peyton's POV be chapter 20 and chapter 21, because I would have liked to see her and Adina go through the process of creating this dress, and I would have liked to see their process of them sitting in some sewing room talking about what happened in Loot while Peyton was gone, or Adina asking Peyton questions about the palace and training and just royal life in general. But we don't get any of that. It's immediately jump cut from Peyton getting Adina to Kai's POV at the ball. At the end of chapter 21, the palace is attacked by rogue ordinaries with pipe bombs. Kai puts his hands all over Peyton and forces her into a safe room because she wanted to help fight. She wanted to help because for some reason she thought she'd be able to help. Her wanting to help fight these ordinaries felt very anti play the part, which is what she's constantly saying when she's in this palace, is to play the part, and I don't get it. So that happens. Then chapter 22 is still Peyton's POV, and my first note is she said slick and sticky bun in the same sentence. I'm gonna go walk into traffic now. There was no really issue with chapter 22. We got a lot more expansion into Kit's personality, Kit's opinion on the ordinaries and the resistance. We sort of got exposition that wasn't explained before, which was good. That's about it. I mean, during this entire attack, Peyton not once is worried about Adina. Not once. If this girl is your best friend, chosen sister, the only person you have left in the world, I would expect you to at least be a little bit worried about them, a little bit oh, the entire ballroom just exploded. Where is Adina? Is Adina safe? Adina is not mentioned. From Peyton getting her, through all the chapters I've read, Adina is not mentioned again. Chapter 23 is Kai's POV. They're immediately thrown into the games. Like, they go to bed, and poof! Next morning, whatever, next afternoon, I guess. There's no timestamps in this book, and it's driving me crazy. The next day, at some time, they wake up in the middle of the Whispers Forest. The trials are beginning. The trial is this trial that they're stuck out in the middle of the forest for, essentially playing capture the flag or like flag football with each other, because they all have these leather straps around these arms. What I did like about this chapter is that we're introduced to people called sites, and sites essentially have they're human video cameras. Okay, that's essentially their thing, is they're human video cameras. And so the sites will see and record things and then project them, and that's how people have watched the trials previously. It said in the book that they would run around the bowl recording things and then projecting them up onto big screens, and I need to know, do they have to look at the screens? Like, are they Bluetooth connected to these screens? How does it work? But also, do these sites need to eat? Do they need to sleep? Like, they're just following around these contestants like the Beetle Blades from the Maze Runner. Do they have a camp somewhere? Like, if I was one of these contestants, I would follow the sites back to wherever they're going, because they're still human. If you need like food or water or anything like that, I'm gonna assume that the sites have a camp somewhere, and you can just find them. I don't know. Chapter 23 and chapter 24 are essentially the same thing, just from Kai's perspective and Peyton's perspective. They both climb trees to look for water. They both find a bunch of weapons just scattered around the forest. And I want to know if there's going to be a bunch of weapons scattered around the forest after this trial. Is there going to be a bunch of stuff that they just didn't happen to pick up that are going to be just left there for people to randomly stumble upon later? They both go look for water. Kai finds a rabbit. Nothing really happens to Kai. He finds the creek and he just hunkers down at the creek. He lights a fire, which is stupid, because then he's alerting people to his location. I don't know, I don't get it. Chapter 24 is a little different though, even though it is from Peyton's POV. She's walking and then she sees water. And this is where it gets very, I don't know, because she sees water, or what she thinks is water, and she also sees Kit's dead body floating in the water, and she screams, and I'm like, girl, you would not survive a horror movie. She goes over and she tries to jump in to figure out why he's dead, but he's not actually there, and we discover that it's Ace's illusionist powers. And I want to know, because I'm assuming a site saw them, I want to know if Ace, lest he not survive, when he gets back to the palace, the king, seeing that Ace used a dead Kit to lure people, if there will be repercussions for that. Something about that feels like treason, to propagate a dead crown prince for your bait. I don't know, something about that feels like you'd get in a lot of trouble legally, and I don't know how to explain it. So she goes in to save Kit, and he's not there, and she turns around and she sees Ace, and Ace surrounds her with a bunch of copies of himself. And we've never seen Peyton and Ace interact ever before this. When they were being taken at the end of chapter 10 to the palace, they had 6 words between them spoken, and then never again. Ace is fighting her kind of, and she looks around at all the aces and she sees one with sweat dripping down his temple, and is that's the one, because he's having trouble projecting these illusions. And I'm how do you know? You have never interacted, never trained against, never spoken to Ace. I found a lot of editing mistakes, a lot of improper sentences, a lot of ways dialogue should not be said with their adjoining action. You know, it was hard to read. Honestly, it was hard to read. I had to read a lot of stuff multiple times simply because I didn't know who was saying what, because there would be a sentence with one person's adjoining action. Let me see if I can explain this better for you. Kai says a sentence. Peyton's action is adjoining it. Then dialogue back and forth with no action and no he said, she said, just dialogue. And then we get to the bottom where we finally have a sentence with an adjoining action, which sets off the kilter for the rest of the dialogue that we just read. So then I have to go back and figure out who said what when, because there's no he said, she said, and the adjoining action is incorrectly placed with the sentence that the person didn't say. Does that make sense? I was real confused quite a few times, real confused. So at the end of chapter 24, she's fighting Ace, and he slices her with his spear. He has a spear. She gets this gash and then doesn't properly treat it before running away. So in chapter 25, which is her follow-up, she's passing out. She's like stumbling around, passing out from blood loss. And if anyone knows anything about anything, is she's been walking for hours with a bleeding gash at this point. Unless you like nicked an artery, you are less likely to die from a rib gash than like shoulder, neck, thigh even. She didn't treat it. Like even after running away from Ace, she just kept walking. She never stopped and like stuffed her wound. She just sort of like wrapped a little thin piece of fabric around it and said, hey, that's a day. We're good. So 25, she gets to the real creek, not the one that Ace sort of illusioned. And Kai is there. Whoa, crazy how they didn't even spend like 4 chapters apart from each other. It was like 2. She gets to the exact same place in this creek that Kai is. The exact one, which I think is very, very convenient. She's gonna shoot him for God knows what reason. Then she passes out. And he can't help be like, oh my gosh, she's gonna die. I can't let this die, oh my gosh. And saves her life, essentially, because conveniently, he finds a tin of healing salve and a needle and thread. Now, this is contradictory, because in chapter 26, this is when this happens, he says, in his inner monologue, in a little inner exposition dump, he says that the salve heals everything and doesn't leave a scar, but yet it doesn't heal her wound. She's on the brink of death, okay? Brink of death. She, in her head, is saying, I'll see you soon, Father. And he puts on this salve that can't heal her wound, but brought her back from the brink of death. But it doesn't heal her like it's supposed to, like we are told it will, so he has to sew up her side. And while sewing up her side, he says something about her being his plaything and just a little girl that he gets kicks out of. I'm paraphrasing. I know she can't see his flaws past the giant red flag that he's waving directly in her face, but at some point you just need to take the red flag at face value and just leave. Oh, I forgot. During Kai's chapter in chapter 23, he fights Braxton, where he gets like a burn on his shoulder over his tattoo, and so he sort of wraps it. Doesn't really do anything like first aid with it. When she's well enough, when Peyton is well enough in chapter 27, she somehow finds the correct healing herbs along the water edge of the creek, grinds them into a paste, which they call a goop, and is applying it to his burn. And this is where she says, I'm the daughter of a healer, remember? Because he's asking her like, hey, how do you know how to do this? How do you know this is the right herbs? And she's like, oh, I had training for this. How? Why? Why does your father need herbs when he is a healer? He just heals them and they're good. Why? But then she says, I'm the daughter of a healer, remember? Which is ironic considering that she didn't know how to tend her own wound and was bleeding out and almost died. It's very convenient, isn't it? I feel like anyone who is anyone knows that when you get a deep wound, you stuff it to stop it from bleeding. You put hard pressure on it and you stuff it to stop it from bleeding. You know, it might hurt, but you have to stop the bleeding. Her not knowing that and not doing that to herself discredits everything that she's saying after that to me. Because how does she not know how to do that? That feels more important than knowing how to find a plant that doesn't exist in loot and making a salve out of it to help with burns. Chapter 7 happens and they talk. And they talk. And they talk about their past. It also had a part that I liked. There's this line in chapter 27 where it says, your concern for my well-being is truly heartwarming, he says dryly. And that, to me, was funny. Because up until this point, I don't think they've ever said anything dryly. They've said stuff behind a laugh. They've said stuff with smirks. They've said stuff with grins. They've said stuff suppressing smiles. But they've never said anything dryly. And I thought that was good. And then their whole little interaction after that was also good. I wasn't cringing in on myself watching this interaction because it was good. It was well done. I felt good. And then it was taken away from me. It was all taken away from me because that's when she says, daughter of a healer, remember? And everything was taken, in my grasp and snatched out like candy from a baby. I was the baby. They keep calling each other partners. And then at the end of chapter 27, the end of this chapter, they are attacked by wolves, which felt a lot like the Mutts at the end of the Hunger Games. We're just doing stuff out of order now. And there's no build-up, really, to why these wolves are attacking. There's no reason. Like, anyone who knows anything about wild animals know that they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But also, it's stated in this book, it is stated that there are wild alien beasts in this forest. Wild beasts. Why we couldn't have a wild alien beast come and attack them for absolutely no reason, I don't know. But instead it's a pack of wolves. They're fighting these wolves, and Peyton is pulling her stitches, which is weird because the salve should have healed her, right? And she can't shoot this bow and arrow that she got. She got a bow and arrow. If that's not Katniss coded, I think I just need to stop reading books. Near the end of this fight scene, he's practically confessing his love for her. I don't know how this is supposed to be slow burn enemies to lovers when there was no enemies. They barely feel like lovers. And this isn't even a slow burn. Chapter 28 is 3 days later. And you want to know what happened during those 3 days? Nothing. We are told that nothing has happened during those 3 days. They sort of walk around the camp in the hopes of finding other contestants. They don't. I don't think they go far enough. 28 feels like a lot more exposition dumping. It's just a lot of them talking, and then they're dancing. She's only answering her questions if she dances with them, which is manipulation and feels like an abuse tactic, but what do I know? She asks him what his favorite dessert is, and he answers lemon tarts, which is good. It's better than saying sticky buns, but he says lemon tarts, and then she makes fun of him for it. Like, girl, you asked the question because you wanted honesty, and he gave you honesty, and you're making fun of him. She essentially calls lemon tarts a poor person food because she's like, why would a rich prince want lemon tarts? Like, girl. And then her favorite food or dessert was butterscotch. Like, that doesn't count, that's a candy. Very end of chapter 28, someone comes and attacks them, and that someone is Sadie, who we have heard and learned nothing about up to this point. Know nothing about Sadie except that she has a duplication power, which is weird and I don't understand. Like, I need to understand how these powers work. Like, does it grow off of her skin and like morph into a new object, or does she like condense the air particles around her into an object that looks like her, and so it has like weight behind it and like force behind it? I want to know how she creates the duplicates. I don't just want to be told, hey, she makes duplicates. Like, tell me how. Explain to me how. I want to know how. I want to know this stuff. Like, this stuff isn't irrelevant. It isn't unimportant. It is important. I want to know. It's part of your world building. Are your powers based more in science, or are they based more in fantasy? It's important to your world building, which she's done none of at this point. Sadie comes up, grabs Hayden, puts a knife to her throat, and is like, I'll kill her. To Kai, she's saying to Kai, I will kill her if you don't give me your band. And he's like, okay. He gave Peyton his throwing star, and she stabs Sadie. Near the end of this chapter, like, they're fighting. This felt very, I forget what the girl's name is, but in the Hunger Games, the girl that comes up at the cornucopia and is like about to slice Katniss like through the eye, that's what this scene felt like. This scene felt directly pulled from that. And Kai just kills Sadie. Just straight up stabs her through the heart. Which, I know he's supposed to be a cold-blooded killer, but at some point, I feel like for your friends, for people you have grown up with, because Sadie and Blair and them have all grown up in the palace together, I feel like you should have a little more compassion, a little more empathy, a little more like, hey, I'm going to spare you because you are my friend. Like, he could have knocked her out. If he had the time to stab her, he could have just knocked her out, hit her in the side of the head with the butt of his sword, because he has a sword too, and knocked her out and carried her away. Instead, he kills her, and then I don't know, we're told that Peyton is panicking, sort of like having a panic attack maybe over Sadie's body, because somehow Sadie's body reminds Peyton of her dad's body and her dad's death. It never really, it's just like, she's just like, why did you kill her? Oh no. And he's like, look at me, look at my eyes, look at my lips, look at my dimples. He says that, like, not in that order, but like verbatim, he's just telling her to like look at him, like look at all this stuff. And then he has her sit down while he goes and he buries Sadie and lays flowers at her grave. And I'm like, Rue? Hello? Are you back? Rue? Because Sadie looks like Rue. Like, Sadie's description is Rue. So that's something. When chapter 30 comes, still nothing happens. They just sort of talk about themselves and their past. And then they fall asleep together. Like, he has her wrapped in his arms and they just fall asleep like that. And that's it. That's pretty much the entirety of chapter 30. In these past 10 chapters, there's been action sequences, which I've said before and I will say again, Lauren can write action. I wish that's what she did, because there's no chemistry between these two characters. We keep getting told, I could cut the tension between us with a knife. The tension between us is so thick. I don't feel the tension. I'm not feeling the tension. I'm feeling betrayal. I am feeling disgust. I am feeling cringe, honestly. Overall, I'm trying to remember if anything happened, but this book is so repetitive that it's hard to remember what is new that I've read versus what I've already read in previous chapters. This isn't what I was told I was getting. I was promised one thing, got something completely different. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm not going to say goodbye because I love you and I'm going to see you in the next video, hopefully. Besides all that, I love ya. Stay safe and I'll see you again soon. Peace.